Hello everybody and welcome back to the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage. I'm making a video today to show you folks why you might on occasion find sewing machines that look an awful lot similar to each other when they have different brand names. And they in fact were sold by different companies, but they might have been manufactured by the same maker. Now the two machines you see here are similar in color but not exactly the same. One of them on the left is a Kenmore straight stitch sewing machine, class 15, made in Japan in the 1950s. And to the right over here, you see something that looks awfully similar, and it says White on it. It is a White branded machine. It was also made in Japan in the 1950s. Now, I have mentioned before that after the Second World War, there were a number of companies in Japan that began to manufacture sewing machines. They took patents that had expired from companies like Singer and others, and they began to make sewing machines to rebuild the Japan's economy. Now, if you look, I have never counted up the number of different, what you might call private label brands that I've come across in the years I've been doing sewing machine overhauls. But I would be shocked if there were not at least 100, maybe more. And when I say 100 brands, what I mean is the name that you might see on the front of the machine. So let's say that you look for a sewing machine and it's listed for sale. It could be on eBay, it could be on online classifieds, and you'll notice that the machine is in fact called, they'll say this is a Singer, or this is a White, or this is a Kenmore, and so forth. But sometimes you'll look at these machines, you think, gosh, they look awfully familiar or similar to one another. So today I wanted to kind of show you all these machines. I believe that both of these machines were made within a few years of each other and were made by the same manufacturer, but they were made as a private label product for different customers or retail customers who would buy them and then sell them to the public. Now the Kenmore was obviously sold in Sears stores and Sears Simpson stores if you were in Canada, and the White machine was sold largely in North America. And yet you look at these and they're remarkably similar. Let's take a close-in look here and we'll look at some of the similarities. One of the things I want to kind of suggest to you all is that a lot of the machines that were built in Japan, when they were created, they were actually created, quite a few of them, without a nameplate or a branding on them. And they were simply shipped over as a commodity, if you will, as a head. The head being the main body and chassis of the machine, but that would not have included a motor plug, or a foot pedal. It would have included wiring for a light if one was offered on the machine, and most of these do have a light, these two do. However, in the early days after the Second World War, all the electricals were largely made in the US or Canada, and they were installed onto the machines along with the labels. So, in other words, a distributor would bring them in, an importer would bring them in from a number of Japanese companies. Now, there may be more, but I'm going to suggest to you there were about a half dozen, about 6 really significant sewing machine makers in Japan, and there may have been more or less. I'm just giving you folks 6 as an approximate number, and yet well over 100 labels of machines. And so companies like Brother, companies like Janome, Toyota, and some of these are quite well known, Juki. These companies built sewing machines, and while they did have a few under their own name, most of the machines they produced were under other brand names, such as private label for department stores like Kenmore, sewing machine companies that had looked to foreign companies to make things for them, like the White Company. And you end up with machines that sometimes look like they are related, and in fact these two machines are. Let's take a little tour, if we will. I'm going to take the camera off of the tripod for just a minute, so bear with me. But I want to zoom in on some features that will give you guys reasoning why I think these machines are related. Some of them are subtle and some of them not so much. Okay guys, so we're going to zoom in here. We're going to look up top for a moment. Let's take a look. You will notice that this is the Kenmore, the one you saw on the left. And you'll notice that it has the little dust valves that close. You can put oil in the holes here, and then there's a little spring-loaded, I guess it's like a cap that seals the top. The white machine to the right has the same features. Now the holes are located in slightly different places, but they're very, very similar to one another. Let's come down and we'll take a look at the bobbin winding attachment, and you can see how it is styled. You'll notice that this piece right here has, there's a grooves on either side here, and we have a fairly common hand wheel. It's chrome ringed on this white model. Let's come over here while we're still up top. Notice the way the side cover plate wraps around the left side, and notice that just for a second. Notice the thread guide here on this, again, is the white model. Let's come over to the Kenmore, and that's awfully similar looking. And then let's come up and you'll notice that the side plate has the same contour, right? So there's a lot of similarity to the way these things are cut. Look at the shape here. After the curve, it comes down, it drops, and you can see that over here on the white model as well. Some differences, of course. The white model, you cannot see that here. You don't see a thumb screw because the door opens, it sits on hinges and it opens up rearward so you can access it. And of course, you folks may remember this is the side plate on this wonderful Kenmore, but the very unique sort of screen machining design, and it actually has a thumb screw and then another screw up here to hold it in place. The motors, of course, the motors would have been made, let's see, I believe they were made in Canada. Well, it says it right on there, Canada. Notice the brand, SMP, and if we come over here to the white machine, the color is black and it says SMP, and of course it was made in Canada as well. That's not a surprise. Let's take a look. Here is the Kenmore foot pedal, and if you notice it, it's a rheostat foot pedal, and it has some cushions on the bottom. The lower two there are cork. Those are my replacements. And then you have the same style and even the same layout of riveted holes here. Now, remember, a lot of the electrical equipment that I'm showing you would have been generically sourced by many companies. So it could be that different manufacturers, they just needed electrical components. They were not always picky about the brand, although they would try to specify the color. And of course, this was in the days before computerized matching. And so somebody sent a sample, and I think the electric company did the best they could in finding a color. It wasn't that they couldn't tell there was a difference. It's just that that was as close as they got. Now let's take a look. We'll look at here is the tension dial, the tension assembly on the front of the white model. And here is the same exact tension assembly on the Kenmore, only in a different color. Now let's turn this. I'm going to turn the camera vertically so you guys can see. This, of course, is the stitch length regulator. You can see the knob. It has sort of a knurled surface on it. And you can see the lever here for you can go up in reverse. And notice that underneath, see if I can get the camera in here without making you guys dizzy. Notice it has a graphic description of the numbers and the way the stitch length or the stitches appear as they get longer. And you can see as the numbers go from 1 to 5, they get longer in length. And now we'll come over to the white machine and you will see something really similar. Now the knurled knob is the same, but of course the little piece here that holds both the reverse lever and the stitch length regulator is a different shape and size. It doesn't have the little window that the Kenmore did. Now, what you would find is that very often, and this is especially true of department store branded machines, if you had machines that were purchased by, let's say, small department store chains, they may not have had the economic power to demand from the manufacturer something special. Sears was a massive retailer once upon a time, and they could go in and they could be very specific. They might have said, well, we want something unique and special for our customers, and Sears could pull that off because they had the power to do that. They had the influence. White may have had their own influence as a distributor for machines. And of course, the irony here is that White was still a part of supplying Sears with sewing machines, but White was having to subcontract out to get more modern designs because the White company never really fully redesigned and retooled their Cleveland factories to go from the old rotary design that they had built for generations to the more modern design of the 50s and 60s. And so they would, of course, had to outsource that. But again, the similarities between these machines are really extraordinary. And again, a lot of manufacturers might have used things like the bobbin winder design that's common to both of these machines. But I think the thing that really sort of cements this the most for me is, of course, in the decaling. The decaling, if that's a word. Notice you have the double gold stripe on the Kenmore, and you have the Kenmore crest, or what I thought was a Kenmore crest. But if you come over here to the White machine, it has the same gold striping, but with a red pin in the middle. And look what we have here, guys. That's not a Kenmore crest, that's a crest. And apparently it applied to the White machine as well. One thing that you can also see here that may surprise folks, notice that there are holes drilled. These holes were not added later. These were original holes that were drilled in the factory in Japan. And the purpose of these holes was so that people, retailers, distributors, could mount their own labeling. So this was done for Kenmore, for Sears. And behind this logo or this branding would have been a place to secure it to two holes in the machine. In later years, they would use adhesives and glue, but back then they were just like with cars. They were installing them into the sheet metal for more permanent fix, I guess if you will. And a lot of the brands that I've mentioned to you all before, a lot of the brands would, of course, attach their logos or their little emblems, that's the word I was looking for, to the machine with the holes. Now, this little white emblem has some sort of adhesive behind it. It's kind of a heavy metallized, it's not paper, it feels thicker than that, like a plastic metallic look. But I suspect that it's very possible that the White company either ran out of their original heavier emblems, or the emblem was ordered and it came up short because it clearly should have covered the holes, right? You shouldn't be seeing those, the white emblem. But I think they were in a situation where they said, well, this is what we got, we've got to go with it. And it's kind of a nice little, it's a little hint, it's a clue, if you will, into how private labeling was done, because there were not 100 companies in Japan making sewing machines in this time frame. And like I say, I can think of maybe a half dozen. There could have been more, but I think a half dozen is a fairly reasonable guess. But there you go, guys. I just wanted to show you why when people refer to Japanese clone machines, sometimes it's an HA1 clone, and it has a shape similar to a Singer 15, very much so. And then all of these, of course, are based on the Singer 15 oscillating hook. They use class 15 bobbins. But yes, these were clones in many ways. So unless it was Sears or another big retail chain that could command more customized looks, these machines would have been made by, in this case, the same manufacturer, and I believe it was Brother. I have seen these stitch length control knobs before on Brother machines, Atlas machines, and any number of other brands. So for those of you who may have come across machines like this, you may see lots of brands you don't recognize. Either they belong to department store chains that have long since gone out of business, or they have all kinds of just original names you might not recognize, like I had one, I think it was called Global or Planet. Lots of different names that are a reflection of people's attempts to sell sewing machines after the Second World War. There were a lot of baby boomers being born, lots of families growing, and people needing sewing machines at home. And of course, these machines that you're looking at now reflect the design aesthetic of the 1950s. Lots and lots of chrome. You see brighter colors, lots more embellishment in some ways. The old black sewing machine, black as a color in sewing machines, had really started to fade. And you see all these bright colors, or even if they were neutral colors, maybe they were beige or light tones. But anyway, guys, this is an example of literally badge engineering from, in this case, the Brothers Sewing Company, who had a lot of contracts. As I mentioned before, Japanese companies were trying to get into the sewing machine game. Japan was a country, at that time, they had very low labor costs. So they were one of the first countries that the United States outsourced production to. And you see here, they were basically building their empires, the sewing machine companies in Japan, on private labels. And of course, today, companies like Brother, Janome, and others are very large companies. And many people in sewing, of course, recognize their names today. But here's a little window into the past, guys, and how the sewing machine companies you know today originally got their start building for other brands. And in this case, it was the White brand, still a very powerful competitor to Singer. And then, of course, you had Kenmore, which was a massive brand and a huge competitor to Singer once upon a time. Thank you for watching, everyone, and I appreciate you taking a look here. You never know what you're going to find when you're coming across vintage sewing machines, and when you start staring at enough of them, you start to see certain similarities. But I appreciate you all watching, and as we get ready for the new year, stay tuned. I've got more videos planned. And if you have not, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. If you do, you can click the little bell and it'll notify you when new videos are posted. Thanks for watching, everyone.